Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with the new classical alphabet, the successor to the famous 3 Bs. Well, today we're on the 3 Cs. The 3 Bs being, of course, Bach, Beethoven, and Brahms, but we had our own alternate 3 Bs. And, well, since no one bothered to do the 3 anything else, at least not, seriously, we're going to supply that lack and go all the way through the alphabet, possibly more than once, until we have every single possible triad of fabulous composers. Now, I want to clear a couple things up. Number one, some of you have suggested that some of the names on these lists so far were not obscure. Like on the Bs, we had Bartók. Well, the idea was not to be obscure. The idea was to come up with a legitimate list of 3 Bs who were alternates to the usual 3 Bs. So it doesn't have to be obscure composers when you're coming up with your list. It just has to be 3 great C composers who would plausibly summarize that letter, in musical history. So don't worry about how famous or not famous they are. It's okay to take the obvious choices if they haven't been used yet, or if it would make an interesting grouping. Sometimes these groupings will be spread out across musical history, as here in the Cs. Other times they may clump together if they are important enough. And we just have to do it that way. We're going to play it by ear as we go. That's number one. Number two, when you submit your own list of the 3, whatever letter it is, it's composer and recording recommendation. You must list a recording recommendation in such a way that people who don't know this stuff would be able to find it or source it or understand it. Or in other words, you have to give enough information that people know what it is. And I know that's a little bit different from what we've usually been doing, but it's important. It's important because people who are not familiar with these composers are going to want to know what to listen to. And so you have to make a recording recommendation. It's a good exercise for all of us. So the letter C. Well, the 3 composers are Corelli, Chopin, and Alfredo Casella. So we've got famous and not so famous. Now, Corelli is a very interesting case because he only published 2 opera, basically, right? There's his trio sonatas, the violin sonatas too, and his Concerti Grossi, Opus 6. That's basically all of Corelli. What is it, 18 works? No, it's 12 works, so it's 36 works. Not a lot. He was extremely self-critical, and he polished and polished and polished the best of what he could do, and that's what he left us. But he was incredibly important. He was the godfather of the Baroque concerto grosso, that is the concerto form where you have a larger ensemble and a smaller ensemble, and they swap back and forth. That's basically what a concerto grosso is. A master violinist and a composer of genuine lyrical gifts. So he lived from 1653 to 1714, and my selection for recording are the 12 Concerti Grossi Opus 6, performed by Ensemble 415 on Harmonia Mundi, if you can still get a hold of that one. What's nice about that is that they use a really big ensemble, about 40 players. It's really, because that's what Corelli had. He expected his works in the Concerto Grosso form to be grosso, grand concerti, a big concerto, grosso, a large ensemble, so that you had good contrast between the big ensemble and the little ensemble. Anyway, they're lovely performances, and Corelli is just one of those names that everybody knows but nobody pays much attention to. But he's very easy to wrap your brain around because there's not that much music, and it's very enjoyable. So there you go. Next, Chopin. Now, Chopin is so unique. Everything he wrote was for the piano. There's involves a piano, 90% of it is solo piano. Yes, there's a handful of songs, a couple chamber works, tiny batch of orchestral pieces, the two concertos and a couple other individual movements. But it's all piano music, one way or another. And he tends to be treated as something apart from the history of romantic music. All I could say is that when people talk about great romantic composers, they almost never mention Chopin, but at least in my experience. But there he is, totally beloved by everybody, and one of the epic major originals in 19th century music, but a special case. I think he needs to be mainstreamed somewhat. Yes, his harmonic idiom and personality and individuality in terms of his writing and his melodic gifts were extraordinary, but he was still a great romantic composer. And if most of what he wrote was smaller scaled, I mean, so what? That's what he did. It doesn't make it less valuable. But anyway, I have chosen the 24 Préludes, Opus 28, with Ivan Moravec, the great Czech pianist. He recorded them twice, once for Connoisseur Society and once for Supraphon. And now they've been mixed together on Supraphon. They're both glorious recordings. He was an extraordinarily self-critical artist, an amazing magician of touch and sonority, and Chopin was his thing. I mean, he was just incredible as a Chopin pianist. And the 24 Préludes are incredible works. You know, they're so beautiful and so popular and so beloved that we forget just how radical they were at the time. They're preludes to nothing. They don't introduce anything. They exist as an integral cycle running through the entire circle of major and minor keys in our harmonic system. And they are unbelievably beautiful, both harmonically and melodically. Some of them are only a few seconds long. It's incredible what Chopin can pack into a small space. So the Préludes are my selection for representative work. And last but not least, here is the unfamiliar name in this particular batch, Alfredo Casella. Now, Casella lived from 1883 to 1947. He was an Italian late Romantic who became a neoclassicist. Later in his career, an enormously gifted musician. His career sort of went into the doldrums after World War II because, like so many Italian artists of his day, he was a supporter of Mussolini, which isn't quite as bad as being a supporter of Hitler, but it's almost as bad. And his idiom was resolutely tonal throughout his life. And so the avant-garde, both for political, and the avant-garde was leftist communist for the most part, which, had its 15 seconds of fame as well. But he was, like most of his generation, Malipiero and Ghedini and a whole bunch of them, ignored after the Second World War, which was a shame because they were a tremendously gifted group. The only one who's managed to come through it more or less intact was Respighi, who was also a Mussolini supporter, and to some degree anyway, and was promoted by Toscanini, who was resolutely anti-fascist. So he had his boosters. Casella wasn't so lucky, but he was a remarkable composer. He was friends with Mahler. He made the piano reduction of Mahler's Seventh Symphony, which Mahler adored, and Mahler set him up with his publisher, Universal Edition. And in his early career, he arranged the first performance of Mahler's Second Symphony in France. He was a great admirer of Mahler, but later his style became quite antithetical to Mahler's, and so he always had much reverence for the man, but not so much for the music later on. The work in question is a neoclassical masterpiece that you absolutely have to hear. It's the Concerto for Orchestra. It's on this disc, on Chandos, with Gianandrea Noseda and the BBC Philharmonic, with a couple other absolutely fabulous works, symphonic fragments from La Donna Serpente, the Serpent Lady, which is absolutely marvelous music, and A Notte Alta, a tone poem for piano and orchestra. It's great. music. One of the problems Casella has is that he wrote in a series of styles. His early symphonies, the first two, he disregarded the first, but the second has some of the first in it, and it's a little messy, but it's very, very derivative Mahlerian, which makes it all the more interesting, actually. And because derivative Mahlerian wasn't a thing back in the day at the time, but then his mature style popped up, and there's all kinds of wonderful, wonderful music. There's his third symphony, there's the Concerto for Orchestra, there are various other concertos and orchestral works, and they are stupendous pieces, just well worth getting to know. There's a wonderful series of recordings. This is a 3-disc series on Chandos. There's a larger series on Naxos, which is very good. I mean, very, very good. As good as this, basically. A little slower tempos, but really well done. And so he's worth collecting now that the music is available. The problem we've had with Casella was that you could hear something that he wrote and you'd say, oh my God, that's wonderful, but then you can't find anything else. But now it's out there. And so you can enjoy it at your leisure, and you should, because he's a major composer. Really a major composer, I believe, from the first half of the 20th century. So we've got the 3 C's, Corelli, Chopin, and Casella. Go for it, and keep on listening. Friends, thanks for joining me. Take care.